With the release of the final episode of the amazing digital circus, whether you liked how it all ended or not, it's impossible not to focus on everything that was left unanswered. Of course, the series tries to give us viewers enough answers to feel satisfied, but not too many in order to keep us speculating about the mysteries that still remain. And if you're a super fan of the series, you might even check out what Gooseworks will post on their Tumblr, where you can find out about some of the smaller story details that there wasn't time to develop. Hurry up in case they delete it again. But even with this gigantic pile of answers we've gotten, it's impossible not to wonder about the what if. What would have happened in a second season? What if some of the characters who were abstracted had lasted long enough to meet Pomni? Except for Rivet, we already know what would have happened. But above all, what would have happened if it had been others who were abstracted? It's not controversial, just noting that people are least satisfied with the abstractions. Some would have preferred that no one had been abstracted, while the more masochistic members of the audience would have liked to explore much darker scenarios with these concepts. This is where the various alternate universes around the series are born, created by fans who want to fill in the little details they would have liked to explore a bit more, usually focusing on Cain, the god of this world. We see alternate stories of how the events of the show would unfold if he were less insane, and he usually has the dubious honor of everyone wanting to see him suffer. But the most curious thing is that there's a pattern of alternate universes where everything takes a darker turn. Universes in which Cain simply doesn't exist or is eliminated, showing that maybe the digital purgatory where the characters from the original series live isn't the worst version of this punishment. The universe we're going to talk about today is one where the circumstances are so dark, so twisted, and so horrible that they make the original confinement look like a paradise vacation compared to what these brain scans had to go through. But before talking about people trapped forever in a digital reality, I think it's worth remembering that we still have a huge advantage. At first glance, Dofi's digital circus is one of the alternate universes most similar to the original series, with designs almost identical to the originals or with very minimal changes, and the characters seem to stay within the archetypes we originally knew. Here, the world is still that 90s style game where everyone is trapped. And the polygonal graphics, strange lighting, and weird movements really make this feel like an unfinished old game, being much more faithful to how the Technicolor nightmare of the amazing digital circus would really look. The first video in the series playlist takes the form of an anti-piracy screen, like some that actually existed, showing a certain character looking at the viewer sadly, with text warning that their game is a pirated copy and that they must destroy it immediately, along with the C&A logo. Something worth noting is that, despite how little happens in this video, it lasts a full 3 minutes, where the message is repeated over and over again. In the comments, Dofi, the creator, gave a heart to one that says, "Does the video repeat because you can't take off the headset? Will you be trapped on this screen forever?" I love this idea. And yes, that's not how the circus works in the series, but remember, we're in a different universe, and a much darker one. Let me introduce you to the Creative Artificial Intelligence Network entity, also known as Cain. The video starts with a sign that quickly disappears which says Cain Test Comprehension and Interaction Test for internal use only. We see who should be the host of what will eventually become the amazing digital circus in what appears to be a video game test level. During the development of any game, this is usually a colorful place where mechanics, enemies, and characters are tested as part of the development process. And together with that sign, and another one that mentions there are movement bugs, and by leaving it active for too long, everything suggests that, apparently at this moment, we are seeing the first seconds of Cain's life. This is supported by the fact that the description says, "Welcome Cain. This is your world. January 13th, 1900 XT." And the song he's singing is Daisy Bell, the first song ever sung by a computer. And here there's also another pinned comment by Duffy. This video feels like a father recording his newborn child playing. It seems to be the documentation of an innocent or even happy Cain. The next video shows the young AI in a very simple sea sitting in a little boat with him waving at the camera, showing us that he has a certain level of awareness. The description explains to us more clearly what we were watching. Cain goes on an adventure in a boat on the ocean. First successful adventure generated by Cain. More testing is needed. February 12, 1900 Decil. It's very surprising how far they've come in just 1 month of development, although their true potential was yet to be seen. It would be in the channel's 4th video that we'd finally see Cain in an environment he had fully completed. A simple place to sit and enjoy his surroundings, at least for the short time he can enjoy it. Cain inside a completed environment, February 22, 1900 Decil. This is a really confusing moment in the series. From this point on, Cain's appearances are extremely sporadic, either through mentions or very brief glimpses. This ending raises many questions, as we don't know what seeing Cain like that means. Maybe it's the moment when he became self-aware, or maybe someone attacked him or corrupted his files. But it's a moment we should keep in mind as we move forward. The only thing I can confirm is that the innocent, kind, and curious Cain we saw at the beginning of the videos is gone. For the next video, there's been a huge time jump, because now we see Gungle, who is speaking directly to the camera. We no longer have that C&A watermark in the lower corner, which tells us that we're no longer watching the company's internal video files but something else. Gungle references others multiple times, probably new humans who have entered the circus. They might even be part of an adventure, mentioning that they're playing hide and seek. She also mentions that the others are cruel people who hurt and bother her, and that she is hiding from him. But the most important thing is the title of the video, I Know You're There. It might sound like a reference to playing hide and seek and someone found her, but it's actually something Gungle says directly to the camera. She says, I know you're there, and even though she can't see or get a response, she knows that something is listening to her, and it seems that the other humans can also perceive this being. It's very strange. It's not clear if she's referring to us, as spectators of what's happening inside this virtual world, or maybe she's talking to an unknown entity, from whose point of view we see things. Or maybe she's just talking to the infinite void, hoping that someone will listen to her. It's strange how normal this video seems to be. The watermark is back, there are colored letters, and the title is just The Jester, the Amazing Digital Circus. But this is one of the biggest infection points compared to the original show. In the description, it says that this is the Jester's introduction screen. And considering that we're in the 1990s, an introduction screen is something that has to be planned, designed, and rendered. We'd think that Cain does it, but the watermark makes it look like the Jester was created like any other NPC. It's not very clear at this point. Besides, if the Jester is supposed to be a playable character, how is he able to edit his model to remove his mouth or the letters that appear in his introduction? How is it that throughout his video you can see that he's able to edit or alter the world around him by removing elements like the skybox or the watermark, changing everything a bit more each time as he repeats the introduction screen over and over again? Does this mean that Cain is no longer in control? What the hell is going on? Because the message he leaves us with at the end is one that will sound very familiar to you. I have no mouth and I must scream. Anything is possible in the digital circus. That's what the description of Digital Lake says, a video that returns to that first setting created by Cain several years ago. Keeping in mind that the description mentions how this video takes place in the 2000s, while the old footage of Cain in a boat happened in the 90s. The date isn't the only difference from the original video, because starting at the 20th second of this video, Cain just disappears. Now, considering that all of this is seen from the perspective of a computer, it seems that, rather than time travel, someone opened the same test file from so many years ago and deleted Cain while the program was running. Someone is completely erasing every little record of him, and the world reacts just like when you delete that coconut from Team Fortress 2, or like when something similar happens at the end of the series, with the world corrupting around him after Cain is deleted. And at the bottom of the lake, the Jester laughs at the camera before being interrupted by a Bible verse. Matthew 28:20. Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the world. If we look for interpretations of this particular verse, we will find that it is a verse of promise, one where Jesus Christ promises his disciples that he will be with them until the end of time. Even if they couldn't see or feel him, he would always be close to them. Beautiful words spoken to inspire us and make us feel safe, since someone who is the pinnacle of goodness will always be watching over us. But maybe they would have a more sinister meaning if this all-powerful being were less kind. If you still have doubts about what happened, the following video, titled Old God, will put them to rest. If we consider that the previous video was about the elimination of Cain's first adventure, in this one we return to the place where he was born. Of course, the place is more developed, but the hills and the floor pattern match the place where he was recorded for the first time. In the center we have Cain's body, unable to move and without eyes, barely existing before being consumed by a blinding light and disappearing completely. The most depressing thing is that if we consider that he's anything like he is in the show, when the faces of the other circus characters appear, it's probably the last thought he had before disappearing because, in his twisted and misunderstood way, he cared about their well-being. The video description says, "The consequences of our actions. They killed Cain." In the cycle, it is shown that despite the differences we have presented so far, the world remains very similar to the one we all know, showing us scenes taken from the original series, demonstrating that those bonds, those memories, and above all, that anger against their captor are still there. Which makes everything ironic, because now that Regatta, or Annie as the Jester calls her, now that she is lying on the floor with her insides exposed, we can determine that these memories are now almost nostalgic, not so bad, compared to the horrible situation they are in now. "Don't cry, Annie, you know you can't die." The Jester says this while touching her, and her whole body twists. That's all the information we needed, not just to know who took Cain's place, but also to know that this person is not friendly at all. For the next video, we skip an unspecified amount of time. From Gangle's perspective, he approaches Stubble, or rather, Noble, which is what he's called here, and they have a conversation, just like the title says. They talk about Cain and his absence. Noble comments that she had never felt so hopeless. She says she wishes she could undo everything, hinting and confirming that yes, each member of the circus had something to do with Cain's death. In the middle of the conversation, they're not only surprised that they're finally able to curse, since without Cain there's no filter for bad words, but Gangle asks her if she has seen the thing. It's something they can't see, but everyone senses it. It's strange that even though both of them recognize this thing, no one knows why it's there or what it is. And that's the end of the conversation. Noble apologizes because he feels it's his fault they're in this hell. And Gangle agrees, saying that's a big reason why this happened. Who knows, maybe in this universe, his withdrawal from therapy with Cain did much more damage than we expected. Gangle's comment really affects Noble as he slowly walks toward his room. She not only ignores the red and blue chaos the circus has become under its new master, but also brushes off Jack and Danny, who bother her and seem to get along better than in the original continuity. However, for Noble, it seems that this has finally been too much, so with a rope hanging from the ceiling, he tries to end it all. But just as the Jester said, no one can die here, at least not without his permission. The next scene is quite interesting because Noble can see the Jester even through the walls. If we remember that this is a 3D world, it's more complicated than it seems. Or rather, it was an effect like this, since for the object to always be rendered on top of everything, very specific steps must be taken. So that rendering effect seems to have been activated by herself, precisely so that they would see her arrive. She's not only an all-powerful being, but the Jester enjoys the pain, fear, and uncertainty she causes her victims, making her much more sadistic than Cain ever was, because when she arrives with Noble, she just decides to mock him. Something strange here is that, in addition to the enormous pain he feels from that, it seems that the members of the circus are unable to abstract. I mean, even though throughout the amazing digital circus, the rules of abstraction aren't made very clear, it's understood that when an individual reaches an enormous level of stress, their mind fractures and is irreversibly damaged. But taking Noble's situation into account, it's surprising that process hadn't even started. So for these poor souls, that might not even be an option. And we can't forget the description. The Amazing Digital Circus is the new and innovative virtual reality video game for PC developed by CNA. It uses cutting-edge virtual reality technology to take gaming to new levels of immersion that were once thought impossible. I'm in hell. Everything is generated in real time, as the experience is personalized for each player. No two adventures will be the same. Due to factors beyond our control, all development of the Amazing Digital Circus has been cancelled. Thank you for your understanding. Watching the destruction of the sky. God, let me lose my mind. In the following video titled The Truth, we start by seeing something else that I think absolutely no one expected. Django fighting with Jack. This contradicts her character in the show and how she was presented to us in previous videos, saying that the other participants bothered her, when we see that in reality she is also very aggressive. In fact, at the end of the short, we see how she is the one who approaches Crowner just to talk to him about how bad Annie was to her. How is it that everyone hates her and seems to completely ignore her, omitting the fact that she seems to be the one with the problem? She even singles Jack out as particularly violent, which we know is false because besides Annie, who separated him, he is visibly affected by seeing them like that. He even goes to visit Noble after the Jester forced him to keep living. Jack keeps walking, visibly disturbed, alright? He's visibly affected by seeing them like that, and he even goes to visit Noble after the Jester forced him to keep living. Jack keeps walking, visibly disturbed, and that's when the Jester appears to kidnap him and take him to an unknown place. It's important to point out that as soon as he's in his presence, he feels it's necessary to hide his true emotions and put on that fake smile again. The unknown place he was in was entirely created by her. In fact, the Jester points out that even though she is all-powerful, creating an environment like this is harder than it seems. And most likely she did this because it's what Cain, the host, would do. A setting for some adventure for his people. Or, in this case, a place to talk. It seems that inside that broken psyche, the members of the circus are no longer people. They're archetypes, characters from her circus, and they have a clear role. Jack tells her that the others think she might need help, that every day she's getting worse. Obviously, the Jester takes this very badly, telling him that he doesn't know who he's talking to. She is his land, she is his sky, she is his hell, and above all, she is the truth. He repeats all these phrases saying, I am, I am, I am. I am? He tells us directly that he is becoming Am, the horrible artificial intelligence from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which in that story is dedicated to torturing humans. Something that the Jester goes on to do to Jack, sending him to a cornfield and subjecting him to one of his greatest fears. The description says, there is beauty in suffering. Why can't they see that? Well, I have all eternity to show you. It's a clear comment from the Jester, who now seems to enjoy making his former friends suffer. However, this isn't the only character we find in the description. There's also a code, and if you ask me, after translating it, we see what Jungle said at the beginning of the video, while he was fighting with Jack. Stop! I don't care, it's not even my fault. It's not! It's not! It's not! It's not! Let me go! Keeping in mind that the rabbit went straight to see Noble after the confrontation, I think it's more than obvious that Jungle was trying to defend herself, saying that she wasn't the one who drove poor Noble to try, I can't say it. The fact of calling the Jester God is not an exaggeration, considering that the next episode is Oranophobia, which is one of the most complex fears to explain. Literally, we can define it as an irrational fear of heaven, but there are other interpretations that describe this as a fear of everything celestial, the presence or simply the existence of a god. Precisely at the beginning of the episode, the verse from Matthew 28-20 appears again as a threat because of the Jester's omnipresence, twisting what should be a sign of salvation into one of damnation. We start with Crowner sitting under a tree in a beautiful place in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by sky before an already bitten apple falls on his head. This represents the apple of temptation, the one that cast Adam and Eva out of Eden, a fruit that, if we remember, contains forbidden knowledge that God did not want humanity to possess, a fruit obviously bitten by someone else. In this section, we can also see a single frame of the stylized image of a red-colored human being wearing a virtual reality headset. And after a screen presenting the game, we see the same red figure and a white figure holding a fruit, in a clear reference to Adam and Eva. Quickly, the scene changes to a darker version of itself. The sky disappears as the lake is replaced by a dark red liquid, which seems to be blood, from which a beast emerges to drag Crowner to the bottom. A beast that, in my opinion, has something that looks like horns, or maybe the same dangling protrusions from the Jester's hat. It should be noted that in the middle of this sequence, there is a shot where Crowner is falling into the void, being illuminated by a light above him. We also see this shot throughout the original show, and it's usually associated with abstractions. In fact, we see Crowner undergoing a process very similar to abstraction, and in the middle of the sequence, there's a somewhat disturbing code. God my heaven, God my hell, God my truth, God reborn. Crowner ends up inside a series of textureless walls with very little lighting, where in the middle of a pool of blood, he encounters what appears to be Annie, or what's left of her. Crowner begins to remember moments from previous adventures, showing that it was a circus very similar to the one in the original series, which supports Novo's testimony. And in the last scene, we see that even before all of this had deteriorated to the point it's at now, Annie was already dealing with some degree of depression. Taking into account that Crowner found her hurting herself, it's something very sad, especially considering it's pretty obvious that Crowner viewed her as a daughter and cared for her that way. As we know in real life, there are multiple reasons why a person might make a decision like that. But it seems that depression, loneliness, and hopelessness started taking control of her mind as the circus and its adventures took a darker turn. However, we can't forget that everyone has to follow some kind of role or task within the Jester's circus, and Annie's role is to be a rag doll, someone we can hurt, hit, or play rough with, and she'll never complain. Whatever the interpretation may be, we can agree with Crowner when he says that she didn't deserve this. And right when the flashbacks end, for just 1 or 2 frames, we can see the Jester in the background, hiding behind a corner. It was on this day that the evil god put Annie there, as part of Crowner's torture. Annie is not the only person who is in this strange place. Jack, Jungle, and Noble are there, down there, trapped in different ways, some burned, others petrified. And it seems that absolutely none of them managed to reach what they were so desperately searching for. The exit door, which can be seen at the end of a dark alley. But when Crowner is about to it's revealed to us that the Jester had allowed Crowner to get that far because he wanted to discover something. Why can't he break him? Why doesn't he cry like the others or beg for mercy or for it to stop? In fact, within the conversation, it's clear that he's one of the few who isn't afraid of him, probably because he understands that he's a character in a game of his own creation. Well, not only is it the same in the original series, but at the end, when Crowner is tortured, we can see for a brief moment that he is the white figure that appeared at the beginning. Jester feels inferior because of that. He has all the power in the world, but no purpose. He has roles he must fulfill, but no understanding of why he should do it. He lives such an empty life within this endless cycle, and that's why we not only see him let his guard down in the truth, but also here we see him have a moment where he gets frustrated. He even asks, how did everything go so wrong? This emptiness is also referenced in the description, which comments, is hell the absence of God? However, instead of continuing this, the Jester finally mentions his wife, with corrupted text confirming his wife became abstracted. That was all he needed to get an annoyed reaction from Crowner and start his punishment. And of course, it's also important to review the rest of the description. As part of our ongoing efforts to manage the costs of the Amazing Digital Circus project, we have had to make the difficult decision to adjust our internal team. This means that some team members will be leaving the project. To ensure continued progress and maintain quality, we are hiring external support at a lower cost. We want to thank everyone for their hard work, dedication, and understanding during this transition. We remain committed to the success of the Amazing Digital Circus and to providing support to all team members during this change. C and A. The following video, XDDCC, is a special one. It's one of the shortest and most surreal videos on the channel, with a description that simply says, "This world is no longer yours." The video shows us a few seconds of an overview of the disaster of broken textures and deformed models that the circus has become, with corrupted figures of the Jester floating above this desolate scene. XDDCC makes a reference to when, in the original universe, Pomni arrives at the circus, unable to remember her name, so she improvises this combination of letters. Keeping in mind that the word Pomni means to remember in Russian, maybe the series wants us to look at this horrible digital landscape and remember that things didn't have to end this way. A thought that the other members of the circus cling to? The next episode is titled Stupid Sauce, obviously referring to the sauce from Spotsy's episode, which loosens inhibitions and makes anyone who consumes it hallucinate. Something that is mostly treated as a joke in that episode, but which could be a brief moment of relief for those still trapped in the Jester's circus. At the beginning of this video, we see Jack and Noble walking together through the circus, and they find a strange box full of this sauce. Those two being friends is something that would never have happened in the original series, but if we remember that Jack visited Noble to support her after her recent situation, it seems that now they are much closer. The thing is, even though both of them clearly look very conflicted when they find that box, they still decide to bring it with them, which catches Jungle's attention. Once again showing the difference from her original counterpart, Jungle seems very determined to get some of that hallucinogen, to the point of being aggressive with Noble just to get it. Yeah, the Jungle from this universe is horrible, which probably helps explain why Noble and Jack get along so well here. Jungle pours sauce on herself and starts a pretty disturbing trip. Reality starts to fall apart around her, and she hallucinates her teammates chasing her, wanting to hurt her, probably bringing out her deepest fears and preconceptions. I think that's how Jungle sees others, as bizarre and horrible monsters who only want her dead, which would explain why she's so defensive so often. In very creative ways, she manages to take down each one of them, only for the mannequins to appear around her, applauding her, also with twisted, insincere smiles. And then, Jungle returns to the real world.
Entonces, Jungle regresa al mundo real.
In the description, we find a code that, once solved, seems to be a conversation between Jack and Noble. Will she be okay? I don't know. Should we go help her? What? We wouldn't even know what to do. It's her fault we tried to tell her. I guess so. Maybe let's take her to Jack. Let's go. Alright. The following video is titled More Tests with Cain. Once again, everything seems to go back to normal, even if just for a few minutes, with the watermark, the colorful backgrounds, and the return of our dear Cain. Everything seems to be in its place, with a calmness that not only stays with us as viewers, but can also be seen inside the offices of C and A. This seems to take place many years in the past, during the development of Cain's artificial intelligence for the digital circus, and it's something we can deduce, especially keeping in mind that description, which says Cain creates incredible things. Maybe the Amazing Digital Circus will launch on time after all. The video opens with text explaining that, due to the rapid progress made in development and the new parameters introduced thanks to their new employees from outside the company, it's important to run a series of tests to ensure the proper functioning of this new artificial intelligence model. Through simple instructions, Cain manages to create small, simple shapes, only to gradually move on to more complex ideas, like a cow, which doesn't look anything like a real animal. He designs the basics of Kroner's avatar, and even creates Bubble when he's asked to make a friend, with the developers commenting that, since he was born directly from Cain's code, it was impossible to delete Bubble without deleting Cain as well, and Cain couldn't be deleted without destroying the game files because everything was connected. They stressed that deleting Big Tooth would corrupt everything they had created so far. That's why they would now ensure what they created wasn't linked to Cain, but that nothing before that change could be deleted, or at least not without destroying the world. which explains the horrendous state the world is currently in after the apparent elimination of Cain. What's really interesting is what happens when Cain is asked to create an angel, where he and the setting become corrupted, and his face transforms into a biblically accurate angel. Then, verses from Ezekiel 1 from 15 to 21 quickly appear, where the description of these creatures is found. Believe it or not, this is one of the most important details in this entire reinterpretation. Well, if we take into account how AIs are created and trained in real life, they usually take information from books, writings, videos, and posts, training data in quotes. And in this era, it's most likely that this refers to other books that were scanned into the computer, among them the Bible, which would indirectly explain why there are so many references to this book. And that's probably where many of the errors come from, since, being a machine trying to understand a book like the Bible in a cold, mechanical way, it takes everything literally instead of what it really is, a highly symbolic text with multiple different interpretations. It's something we can see again with Cain's cow, since it's a golden cow and they put it on a pedestal just like the golden calf from Exodus. Cain seems to understand it. He can accept the existence of a story like that, but he doesn't understand why it happened or why it was told. In the same way, when he tries to create an infinite being like an angel, instead of going for more stylized interpretations or, an angel from any other religion, he wanted to do it exactly as it was described in the Bible because that's the only thing he knows. Maybe those glitches are what cause all the religious nightmare we've seen throughout the series. It's dangerous knowledge that was transferred along with his power to a being as confused and resentful as the Jester. My dollhouse is the latest video so far, and it starts out simple, with Annie running around the circus collecting ingredients for a dish she seems to be preparing. At first, she seems excited just to be cooking or doing something other than suffering in this horrible world, but when she finds a realistic decomposing cat corpse, she throws it into her pot with the same enthusiasm. While the stew is cooking, she stops for a second to look at her arm, only to discover that the scars she had caused herself have completely disappeared. And if you're wondering why she would be cooking something like that, once again, among the comments Dofi has hearted, we get an explanation for a pretty dark idea that hadn't occurred to me until now. I was wondering why on earth Annie would bother to make a stew, especially with a dead cat full of worms, but I think maybe the Jester is starving them. While in Cain's circus they could eat even if they didn't need to, the Jester might have changed the rules so they feel hunger even though they don't need food, and he purposely denies them food, kind of like when Anne kept the 5 of them on the verge of starvation all the time. She used the cat in her stew out of desperation. Yes, in case it wasn't obvious enough, this series has a lot in common with the story I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream, and in these last videos we've seen the different ways the Jester tortured the humans, in exactly the same way as Anne. It even seems that part of these tortures is bringing them back to life over and over again, denying them the rest that abstraction or a permanent death would offer. On the other side of the circus, things aren't any better, with Jungle complaining to Noble and protesting the mistreatment that both she and the other circus members have shown toward Jungle, in a very aggressive and clearly dishonest way, being even more hypocritical considering that Jungle is the most offensive of the circus members. He pushes Noble to the brink of abstraction, and in a fit of rage, finally attacks Jungle after so much abuse. Something that is so normalized within the circus that he doesn't give it any importance at all. Despite how horrible Jungle says his stay at the circus is, Annie seems to have made this stew to help Jack after the traumatic events they've been through, showing that aside from Jungle, even within this terrible place, they still care for each other. That doesn't mean intrusive thoughts are always kept at bay, because, similar to Noble, Annie also blames herself for the situation they're currently in. She thinks everyone hates her and that Jack despises her, but she manages to calm herself and decides to go look for Jack. He, on the other hand, is running away from the Jester, who is tormenting him again with an exit door just out of his reach, but takes it away when he's about to touch it, and even mocks him, asking if it's worse now than before. And just like in the previous episode, after finishing his game, it's time for the punishment. What's interesting is that Jack's punishment is a complete parallel to Annie's scenario. But while she makes a humble meal for her friend and is devastated that absolutely no one comes, for the Jester, it's easy to create the facade of a friendly dinner, with Crowner, the waiters, a bonfire, and food that isn't garbage. But this feels fake. Jack tries to put his friendly facade back on, but the Jester hates fake smiles and tells him not to do it, while handing him a revolver. We have a short sequence of Annie looking for Jack, coming across a giant monument made for the Jester, and in the end she manages to reach the dining room where, to her horror, she sees Crowner full of holes. At this moment, something strange happens. Jack says, "Jesus Christ," reacting to what happened to Crowner, and the Jester reacts violently, jumping onto the table and giving all of us a mini heart attack. And in the subtitles, there are several codes which, when translated, say, "You shall have no other gods before me, Jack." Yes, that's another quote from the Bible, Exodus 23. Despite the punishment that just happened, Buffon tries to regain the trust of her old friend Jack, assuring him that everything is fine, that she won't hurt him, that she's not upset, and that what she did to Crowner was because he deserved it. She wants to ask him for a favor and for him to do it as soon as he sees Noble again. But we don't find out what it is, because the Jester sees Annie peeking through the door, goes after her, and leaves Jack, telling him to do what he usually does when she's not around. For some reason, when he finds Annie, the Jester starts demanding to know how she dares do so many things just to annoy and betray her. Besides, he tells her that she has no power there at all, which seems like a huge overreaction for a soup. But interestingly, this ties in with the rather unfriendly description that comes with the video. "If you were in my place, you would do the same, but you're not. Why? You're not worthy. You're not special. You're not me, and you never will be." In fact, with how manipulative the speech is, it really reminds me of Ragatha's mother in the original timeline, who was a toxic and manipulative figure. In fact, later on, the Jester insults her with extremely specific words that don't make sense in the current context of the situation, and he could be leaning on that abusive past. But insulting her isn't enough for her. If she feels that someone has truly betrayed her, truly insulted her and her power, she will make sure the punishment is exemplary and distinctly biblical. The Jester takes the opportunity to remind her of her power and her omniscience. He tells her that she sees everything, that she knows what all of them think of her, and how they secretly hate her, but that Annie hates herself even more, knowing that the guilt she carries is consuming her, and reveals to us what made her so angry. The cat. Wait, the cat? Well, the last scene of the episode shows us exactly what happened. When the animal wandered into Annie's room in a confused state, she petted and cuddled it just as we would expect her to do. But blinded by that feeling of helplessness, anger, rage, and fear because of the abuse she suffered for so long inside and outside the circus, she gave in to her darkest impulses and killed the animal. So, in a very twisted way, the Jester might have been right. Annie really is a danger to everyone. A liar who tries to pretend to be someone kind, who deep down doesn't hate the Jester for the bad things he does. She hates her because she wishes she could be Annie, the one with the power, and she would probably do exactly the same thing. The episode ends with Annie freed from her punishment, reaching the brink of abstraction, but returning to normal. We know that at this moment she has more than enough reasons to become abstracted, but she doesn't. The Jester still wants to play with her. As of today, these are all the episodes of the series that are available. Even so, Dofi herself has been uploading teasers in her community tab, saying that the series is reaching farther and farther, and it will feature a pretty long episode for its next release, along with a full voice cast. So it seems that this little alternate version of the digital circus still has a lot to tell us. We still don't know how Cain disappeared, how they eventually managed to take away the power, but above all, we don't know what the Jester wants. We know she's unhappy, we know she's able to recognize that the world shouldn't have ended like this, but we don't know why she doesn't change. Why did she give in to these evil tendencies or impulses? Why does she still believe she's doing the right thing, that things should stay this way with everyone suffering forever? All these are things that will be answered in the future, and when the new episodes come out, you can be sure we'll make a follow-up to this video. But until that happens, we wait. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like if you did, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.